Okay.
So welcome back, Wade. And too bad we can't get a face to face, but um, we had that before, so everybody knows what you look like from the other one. But were you able to take a look at your video that we did before
Yeah, I
and
did.
kind of
I
refresh
did.
yourself?
And it's been quite a long time since I've seen myself recorded at all, much less for that length of time. And there's, you see the mannerisms you don't realize that you have. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. That's one of the hardest things I have about doing this is just seeing myself make stupid mistakes or just my facial features just well, yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of hard to look at yourself sometimes. Um, but what we were talking about when we met at Heli Expo was the stories of finding yourself where you didn't necessarily want to be. Icarus tales. Uh, you knew you shouldn't be there, or you found yourself someplace where you shouldn't have been, and you worked your way out of it. And you survived, and you survived to be here talking to me, but you survived also to be a chief pilot and influence an awful lot of young and old pilots alike that work under you. Not necessarily for you, but work under you, I guess, is a better way of
sure.
saying it. So, what did you had a chance to take a look at? And let me pull this up here real quick. I'm going to switch a couple things out. I'll cut out the my switching back and forth since I'm doing this on my own. I'm going to switch that over to there and bring up your file. And I'm going to bring also leave that there. Okay. And what I want to do. This is another part of it I'm trying to figure out how to make this.
That's a good thing. You can make all this seem smooth and seamless in post production, right? And editing and everything else.
That's the whole goal. Yep. There we go. Yeah, the live once I figure this out, I may try to do a live stream right through all this and
Yeah.
do everything live. But there I am. So so as we talk, um, uh, what I want to do with this is go through the personality assessment that I sent you and that you did called the risk type compass. And the risk type compass is a interesting way to look at people because it looks at people from the risk tolerance or risk kind of how you look at risk as opposed to how you make decisions or how some of the other ones look at your values. Some of the ones look at they look at a lot of different things every time you take a different personality assessment. This one takes a look at your risk taking and how you look at that risk taking. And just so that everybody can see, there's where you ended up, right there in the deliberate risk mode. And you can see the risk type compass is shaped like a compass, so we can talk north, south, east, west on here as we discuss things. And you are very much over on the east side of the center line.
Yep.
And that means something. And before I get too much more into this assessment, did you looked at yours?
I did.
Did you read through it? And what was your thought process, or what were your thoughts about your personality type as far as risks are concerned?
When I was reviewing the video, one of the things that I said in there is I'm typically pretty risk averse, so by nature, I'm not a careless or carefree or risk tolerant person. And part of that comes from my background. I mean, I've got no sympathy for stupid. I've got no sympathy for careless or um, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Egregious, type of activities.
Uh-huh.
It's self when you're that person, the results you get are self-induced, and you can't be surprised when you have to face the consequences of your actions.
Yep.
In my past life, I worked as a paramedic for a long time, and someone told me years ago, it was probably my mom, that working in that type of industry is going to make you very hardened as an individual. And I always countered with that it makes you very much a realist, with with regards to life in general.
Hmm.
So if you want to be the cowboy that goes out and gets on a bull and he tramples on you, I hate it, but that's a risk you took and a consequence that you got. So I'm not sympathetic to that kind of stuff, which is, I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's absolutely shaped the way that I approach the risk I take.
Okay. Yeah, I tell you, you're spelling yourself right into this location right there. Um,
Yeah,
the when I did the risk when I did the research for pilots and air medical crew members a few years ago, one of the things that I discovered was pilots tended to be right here. This half, that basically the east side of the risk compass, is where pilots tend to be, especially prudent, deliberate, and composed, and axes right there in the middle.
yeah,
And I have a theory about the axes I may get to later on, but the interesting thing that when I was working with the company that designed this, I actually worked right with them, and they're which was great because they had all the psychometric knowledge and were able to anything that I asked them, they would show me a new graph, and it was great. Um, but one of the things that they showed, and one of the things that they found, was when we asked the question of the pilots, and there was about 55 pilots or 56 pilots, something like that, that I'd asked about. When we asked a question about how they got their training, civilian or military, civilians, the center of the pilots was right here, deliberate, right where you're at. The civilian trained pilots tend to focus more to the north of that in the prudent area. So they were deliberate and prudent were the two main areas, where the military were deliberate and composed, were the primary focus for the military side. And that's an interesting thought process. But what really you just described yourself right dead center where you're at, and then down into the composed area pretty nicely. And so that's what I want to talk about. What this description is for you, based on here, and I that's why I ask people how you feel. Uh, so basically, at the root of this risk type, the deliberate risk type, calm, self-confident, combined with detailed preparation and planning. We on track?
yeah. I'm probably not the most detailed planner, but
Okay.
yeah, I would say calm, pretty level-headed, self-confident for sure.
Okay. I'm good with that, and I'll show you why
Yep.
here in a moment. Most extreme examples, and what they talk about as extreme, is the closer you are to the outside. So as you get to the outside, that's where the extreme examples tend to come from. As you get to the middle, it's really hard to tell really who you are.
Yeah.
So the most extreme examples are calm, cautious, and cool-headed. Although not afraid to take risks, they work to eliminate uncertainty through thorough planning, attention to detail, and by considering options with painstaking care. Um, and that's kind of what I heard you say both here and also when we were at Heli Expo. You're talking
Sure.
that same type of thing. Um, However, because they're highly organized, compliant, and well informed about what is going on, they are unlikely to walk into anything unprepared. Okay.
Agree. Yep.
Any aversion to risk will be practical rather than emotional, and I hear you saying that a lot too.
Yeah.
Um, and what's funny is I tend to see these people over on this side as not the best people persons, and yet I see you very good at that, and that's a really positive thing, uh, that you have learned to be able to talk to people. But I think the one question I asked you on the last one was, how do you feel that when you're down there on the floor? um, and you, it's 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 an interesting balance to this personality type is that your people skills.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's interesting. Thanks.
yeah, that's good. I mean that's something that here's the thing too is this entire compass is everybody. You aren't stuck in a certain area. You might prefer, you might work there, you might be there most of the time, but you can slide into any of these things, and that just takes a little bit extra training and knowledge. And I think your time in the training world probably really sets you up well for that.
Yeah, probably so. And when you make the comment about the people person or the personality side of it,
Hmm.
I'm pretty content by myself.
Oh
You know,
yeah, yeah,
and like you said, that typically fits this personality. Um, but why I don't know. But that's just I work. I'm blessed. I get to work from home, which I spend a lot of time by myself now. In my office,
yeah,
but that fits me pretty well. And I remember thinking when the whole COVID shutdown happened. What a great peaceful time that was. It was a great reset to the world. I remember driving into town thinking it was a right middle of a business day, but it felt like a Sunday from about 40 years ago,
yeah,
right? The businesses were closed down. There's no cars on the streets. There's nobody out moving around. I mean, everything was just quiet, and I thought it was very refreshing.
yeah.
There's a lot of white noise in the world today.
So let me roll down here a little bit more. Upside tendencies of the risk type. Again, calm, logical, systematic, minimize emotion in their decision making, determined to get on track, to get back on track, they get over failures quickly. And that's something that is really cool about working in this risk type. And that's pilots need that. We make a mistake, we go, oh crap, we could have died right there. And the next minute we're back doing it or doing something similar to it. And it's like we get over failure pretty quick. And I think if
Sure.
you can't, you're probably not a pilot in this business. Would you agree with that?
No, I think so. I think that makes you successful as a pilot is
Yeah.
you move on from your mistakes and you course correct from there. Um, I saw a kid wearing a T-shirt that said "Don't trip over what's behind you," and I thought that was a fantastic. It's a good just life value.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
learn from your lessons, but by golly, don't keep it in front of you all the time.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's really important, especially in what we do, because we live on the edge so much sometimes. It's just that's just where the helicopter is designed to be, and sometimes that in itself will get us into trouble. Is that we get so used to that.
Yeah,
Uh, so typically upbeat, even under stress, they remain optimistic. The decisions are guided by logic. I mean, this fits you pretty well.
yeah.
The downsides. I don't know if you saw anything that really stood out if when you read through these. Um, Risk type may be so confident that they seem inflexible. Um,
Yeah, and I was looking at that, and it's been a couple of weeks since I've read through this, so I'm
okay,
kind of reading it again as we're going through it. That first bullet point, there's a confidence that you have to do the job that we do.
yeah,
There's a fine line from being confident or being convinced, and I think if you want to be careful, people like to stay on the right side of that line.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I joke with people because I know the personality type that we deal with, and I'll tell people, and I can tell you that you're the second best pilot I know, right? I'm sorry, that I'm the second best pilot you know. Let's put it that way. It says the same thing,
yeah,
but
yep,
we all think we're pretty good at what we do, but we'll never be better to the person that we're talking, that's talking to us or whatever. Anyway,
yep.
um, but no, I think sometimes you have to play that confidence card properly, or you do seem inflexible, right?
Well, and
So
the other side of that is there's one right here in the middle. Their calm, rational, and methodical approach may seem unfeeling.
spot on.
Yeah, and that's because of we're so far, and especially where you're at when you did the assessment, you're so far to the right on the east side. All that emotion is on the west side, and it's your excuses or your decision making comes from that not thinking about people. Now, the fact that you think about people is a part of that, and that's what's hard to see. But that's hard to see.
Yeah.
I think in our conversation in Heli Expo, one of the things I caught again was I talked a little bit about that personality of you're just you're just so much about taking care of the organization, and in process of taking care of the organization, all those people that are under you are taken care of also. And so you don't necessarily focus on the individual, you're focused on the organization, and that is really important because that's how people are taken care of. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. It comes back to, and I've evolved, right? My
Yep.
personality, I'm sure, has changed as I've grown up and gotten into this job. But also, I'm this job position is paralleling as my kids are coming of age too. I mean, I've got teenagers now. I've been in this role as chief now for about 8 years, and of course, I've been in training for almost 20, et cetera. But so as you grow as an individual, even with kids, it becomes a you change your role to be more of a servant
Yep.
to their needs than your needs. And I never thought I was a selfish person until I had kids, and I realized I was very me centric, which I guess that's probably normal.
Yeah.
But you realize at some point you don't go fishing anymore. You take the kids fishing, or you don't go skiing. You take the kids skiing, and the same thing applies to the career in aviation. It's not about what can I do for myself as a pilot, what ladder can I climb, or what title can I obtain. You get to a point where it's it's no longer about serving you. It's about serving the um, who depends on you.
Right.
And without taking up too much time, I often use an analogy when I'm talking to new pilots or people that are interested in coming to work for us. And I use a Broadway play as an analogy. I said, the people on the line, the frontline pilots, the frontline clinicians, if they were in a Broadway play, they would be all the people in front of the curtains. They're
Mm-hmm.
the ones that the lights are shining on and people are clapping for. When you're in a role like mine, in similar roles, it's very much supportive role. You're the people, you're the guy in the sound booth, hitting sound cues and making sure the spotlight's in the right place at the right time. You give them the tools to make them look good, which parallels the job of a father and everything else.
Yep. Yeah, and if you've ever heard of servant leadership, that whole concept you just spelled it out right there.
Sure.
Where you take care of them by making sure they can do what they're supposed to be doing, and
Yeah.
so your job is not to come out and do my job as a line pilot. You've done that before. Your job is to make sure that we have everything we need to do our job as a line pilot. It's not, it doesn't go the other way around. And so, yeah, that's kind of where you learn that.
Yeah, it is. And um, one of the things I heard years ago, they said if you think you're truly a servant leader, or if you think you have a servant personality, how does it make you feel when you're treated like a servant? And I went, that's a real ego check, and you have to be willing to accept that. I mean, because you do work for somebody,
Yep.
you do serve a boss of some sort, and so you have to realize that you are still a servant to others as well as the people that you're trying to serve.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So getting now your opposite. So this is the exact opposite. This is on the west side of the compass. Is the excitable type. At the root of this type are impulsivity and an attraction to risk, but distressing if things go wrong. Would you say that's your opposite?
Yeah,
It's amazing. I like that how they're attracted to risk and they get really freaked out when things don't work out the way they want to do it. That's
yeah,
that's a really strange way of thinking, but there are people out there like that, and it's really wild to watch them in action. Uh, your neighboring type, this is where the one right below you there is composed, and this is what I was saying is was not totally left to the military personality type or the military training, but tended to be where the military training took pilots, or maybe the pilots that went through the military tended to look this direction. The root of this type is a high level of composure and self confidence. This type is cool headed, calm, and unemotional, but at the extreme may seem more almost oblivious to risk. I hear some of this, especially the composure and self confidence. I hear that a lot in what you've been saying. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's where you are towards the bottom of that prudent risk type, or not the prudent risk type, but the deliberate risk type. You are closer to this one, and so you tend to come out. And I'll show you in more detail here. Um, Talks about your prominent characteristics, and you can go through that unless you have something you want to share around that.
Um, I have to tell you, I chuckled when you were asking me that last question about. I'm gonna scroll back to the top where it says, um, oh, just the prominent. Oh, where was it? Oh, the neighboring type, right? Where it says compose, it
Okay.
says at the root of this type is a high level of composure and self-confidence, right? Confident in what you do. And you said, the question was, do you think that's you? And I went, yeah, I think so. Well, that's a pretty loose answer to a self-confident question, isn't it? But but yeah, as far as the prominent characteristics, um, they probably fit me pretty well,
Okay.
and I go back to well, there's a couple of things that guide kind of the way I look at things. One of them came from a wall hanging on my mom's wall when I was growing up in my house, right?
Okay.
And she had this plaque in her kitchen that said, "If you kiss a frog first thing in the morning, nothing bad or nothing worse will happen to you for the rest of the day," right? So do the bad stuff first. Now, how I apply that is if I'm faced with a problem, I'll take that, I'll work that to the end. What's the worst that can come out of this? Right?
Uh huh.
I make peace with that part of it. What's the absolute worst that can come out of this? I figure out that piece of it and I just work it backwards. And anything that gets uh anything that happens other than that worst, it's not a problem. I've already dealt with that. Right. So you figure out what's the extreme, you deal with that and you move on. Then you go
Yeah.
back to that, don't trip over what's behind you. Everything else is just a choice. I mean, how you respond to anything, that's the only real control you have in this great world is your response to a situation.
Yeah.
And you can choose to be excitable or you can choose to be composed. And this also parallels with raising kids. And I try to teach my kids, and they'll say, well, my brother makes me mad. Nobody can make you mad. You can choose to get mad at what they did, but it's a choice. And once you realize that, to me, the rest of it gets pretty easy.
Yeah.
You get a choice.
Yep. Yeah. You're right on. And right down here is that area. So you have a positive, optimistic, upbeat approach to life, even tempered, and have a belief in your own worth. And that's pretty much what you've been describing.
Yeah. I People ask me, they say, "How you doing today?" I say, "Man, I'm walking on sunshine." That's my standard line. Now it's a pull from an '80s song, Katrina and the Waves,
Yep.
"Walking on
Yep.
Sunshine."
Yeah,
But
I get that. See,
yeah, you do. You're right there with me. But
us old guys. Yeah.
I really believe. I mean, it's a choice. If you wake up and you're gonna have a bad day, well, guess what? You're gonna have a bad day. But I've taken that kind of that whole walking on sunshine to a physical attribute that I play guitar as a hobby, and every guitar I've got's got a guitar strap, and emblazoned on over all the guitar straps are just great pictures of suns. The big just the sun with the rays sticking out of it. It's just all over the straps, and yeah, I mean, I believe it. How you doing? I'm walking on sunshine all the time.
I tell people all the time. I said, yeah, my outlook on life and my blood type are the same. Be
Yeah,
positive.
hey, be positive.
Yep.
I like that.
So here's the funny part. So as they go through, when you take the assessment, they look at these different sub themes, and so all the questions within that assessment focus on sub themes, not on something bigger. So they're looking at these very specific aspects of you. If you and of course they worked in the two dimensions. So they worked in the emotional dimension, which goes from the upper left to the bottom right, and then in the cognitive dimension right here. So look where you ended up. You maxed out down here in the calm area.
Yeah,
The resilient, confident, forgiving, optimistic, equitable, that typically is composed. So in reality, you probably should have ended up in this composed area. Um, but you had a lot of that conforming here, focused, that basically drags you up a little bit further to the north and towards that prudent area. Now, the area that I think that dragged you up, that took you out of the composed area, is all the regulations, is all the rules following, is all the 135 aspect of what you do. You have to follow all these FAA regulations and rules and the all of that. Are you kind of hanging with me there?
Yeah, I'm
Does
there.
that make sense?
It does, absolutely.
Then look at the emotional side. When you answered the questions, and this is where this all comes from, it's not necessarily who you are deep down, but how you answered those questions. Okay.
I chuckle at the sensitive. Oh, I see the meeting ends in 10 minutes. I've told too many stories. Sorry,
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'll have to edit that out.
that's okay. But I chuckle at the emotional where it says sensitive. I mean, that's
Yes.
just four blanks, and that's not really true. But I just don't tie up a whole lot of it.
Well, again, and it's how you answer. And how did you answer this? You answered this as the chief pilot. So
Yeah,
you were the chief pilot when you did this, which really doesn't include emotion a lot until you need it. And then you can slide over there probably pretty well. Again, because of the training that you've had over the years. And that training is so important to keep us out of trouble. So if we have a bad side to what we do and all those negative things that they talked about your personality can get you into, training does a lot to get you out of that. And so that's kind of where this ended up. And that's what brought you a little bit further to the north. And like you said, I don't ever hear you quote regulations or uh, 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 quote how we're supposed to do things. You just say it. Okay, you just know it, and that's what this personality type does. The composed personality type just simply knows this stuff, and so you react and you act from your knowledge, not some book or not some regulation that is telling you how to do that. That's this up here. That's what brings you down a little bit, or brings you back here to the compose area, which is really kind of neat. That's what when I first asked you if you got this, I said, "Well, we're gonna have fun talking about you," because I mean it's like, oh wow, look at this. Um, One last thing I'm going to talk about is this forgiving in here in the calm here, and forgiving is basically being able to get past something that goes wrong, either with somebody else or for pilots. I think forgiving really is important for yourself. You do something wrong, you make a stupid thing, you almost kill everybody on board. You got to forgive yourself from that. You learn from it. You never forget it. You shouldn't forget it. That's what these stories I'm trying to bring out in people. But you can forgive yourself and move on. Does that make sense?
it does. Yeah, and in my role that I have today, I tell people all the time. I say it's okay to be wrong. It's not okay to stay wrong. Right?
There.
When you
Yep.
stay wrong, it's deliberate. Being wrong is just a mistake. People make mistakes for a variety of reasons. Um, I make mistakes for a variety of reasons, but if I make the same mistake a second time, well, then that goes back to being a neglectful, which
Yep.
that's one of the things I've got very little compassion for.
And I got stories of making mistakes. In fact, um, your predecessor mate gave me a call one day to find out my side of what I had done. And he said the same thing. He appreciated my honesty and my clarity and what I thought I did wrong, and we moved on. And that was very appreciative by me. It was actually my first about 3 months into working for PHI, um, and I learned the lesson. That was actually in 2008 when there were so many deaths because of mistakes that were made.
Yep.
That was a bad year. Um, So that's kind of where we're at. Oh, the last thing I want to do is before we go, is because it's kind of ending up here, and you can read the rest of this on your own. Is this one right here? So this chart here is called the risk attitudes, and the risk attitudes, it's a 100% wheel. So how you answered your questions, if you answered a question that was more health and safety, something else got smaller. So this is your preferred way of, or your I should say your preferred risk that you are more willing to take, if that makes sense. Um, in this particular thing, this particular one, financial, it talks about the keys. Um, you can see how financially and health and safety wise, you're more than willing to take those type of risks. Reputation, you're not. So what's reputational? Tolerant about behaviors that may offend others' sense of propriety. I think that's a lot to do with, again, how you talk to people. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Um, but as pilots, typically we're more than happy to stay away from that doctor. In fact, doctors tend to be what we don't want to see because they're the ones that take away our life, our living. Um, so
Well,
inattentive to matters that may impact on health and well-being.
with the health, I remember some of the questions were asking things, and I can't quote the question, but
Yeah,
one of them was, would you rather, do this or go to a country unvaccinated? It was those kind of questions kind of open, and I'm thinking, well, basic hygiene takes you a long way, knowing how to
yeah,
just basic hygiene, how to prepare food, this, that, and the other. So that if
yeah,
you follow those basic standards, a lot of those risks in those uh, non-vaccinated
yeah,
countries, I guess, are not nearly a problem. So
yeah.
there's some self-control in that as well, right?
Yeah, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. I
Right.
think one of them was you prefer not to go to go see the doctor. You'd rather take care of it by yourself or something along the same lines. Um,
Probably.
so this is an interesting thing, and this is what I ask people: which risk are you willing to take? Are you willing to take that risk of being thought of as the one that is not willing to launch today, or the one that's going to launch because you don't want people to think you're the one that's not willing to launch? Does that make sense? Um,
Yeah.
so there's a lot to be said about not being afraid to be thought of as the one that's the most risk averse.
Yeah.
You don't have to prove yourself. You're in this job because you have proven yourself. And yet we have people every day that they feel that they have to prove themselves. And I tell you, when I first started a long time ago, before even, especially before PHI took over, we were kind of a loose group of people that felt that we were going to, we had just started the base. And I heard often that if we don't keep flying, the base might close. And that was a dangerous thing to do. And I'm glad
Yeah.
PHI came on board because they changed a lot of how we thought about what we were doing. And that was a very comforting thing to do. So, anything else before we call it a day here?
No, I think this was a fun project to undertake and be a part of, and I appreciate the feedback and the just the interpretation of some of this.
I'm hoping that that people appreciate it. I'm hoping that this goes a long ways. I know Brett is looking to advertise a lot of this on with NEMSPA, and so I got some other names in my stack of people to get in touch with, and they might be even harder to get in touch with than you are. But when I go places, I'm going to take along my little cell phone and my little clip-on microphones, and I'll try to get some interviews wherever we happen to be.
Sure, I
But
think it's great. Well, I
thank
appreciate you
thank
doing
you
what
for
you
you
do.
yeah thank you for your time, and appreciate everything you do there, Wade. And this is Wade Cook. He's the chief pilot for PHI Health, and keep everybody safe there, Wade. And like I said, I appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Ken. We'll talk to you soon, pal.
All right, talk to you later. Bye.
Bye bye.